The prince dared the castle maid to tame his wild horse, and she won, stealing his heart in front of the entire court. The dusty stable yard falls silent. A maid, her hands raw from work, steps toward the raging black stallion. Courtiers laugh. The prince smirks until the beast bows its head beneath her touch. But this is no simple dare. What begins as a cruel jest ignites a forbidden bond. Whispers ripple through the castle. The prince is promised to another, and the maid carries secrets that could ruin her family. Can love born in the stables survive the fury of a crown? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from, and if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more. Dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, as Liesel's knees pressed against the cold flagstones of the royal Bavarian castle's courtyard. Her hands, red and raw from the morning's work, gripped a coarse brush as she scrubbed alongside the other maids. The sound of their brushes scratching against stone filled the crisp morning air. "More water here," called Martha, one of the older maids, and Liesel hurried to fetch another heavy bucket from the well. The weight made her arms tremble. But she'd grown used to such labor over the years. The courtyard bustled with mounting excitement as stable boys and huntsmen prepared for the day's grand hunt. Horses nickered in their stalls while hounds bayed eagerly, and servants scurried about with polished tack and gleaming weapons. The clip of fine boots on stone announced Prince Alaric's arrival. Liesel kept her head down, focusing on her work as he swept past in his magnificent hunting attire. Forest green velvet trimmed with gold braid. Soft leather boots buffed to a mirror shine. His coterie of courtiers followed in his wake like peacocks on parade, their rich clothing a stark contrast to the servants' plain garb. "Mind you, don't dirty His Highness's path," sneered one of the younger nobles, causing Liesel to draw back her bucket and brush. As she did, Prince Alaric's gaze fell upon her work-roughened hands. "My word," he drawled, lips curling in amusement. "Does the girl scrub with bare hands? They look as coarse as a farmer's." The courtiers tittered obligingly at their prince's wit. Liesel felt her cheeks burn, but kept silent, knowing her place. Yet she couldn't help but notice how the prince's own hands were soft and pale, never having known a day's true labor. Speaking of untamed things, one of the nobles said, "How fares your wild stallion, your highness? Still unconquered, I warrant." Prince Alaric's chest puffed with pride. "Fenrir, no man can tame that beast. He's thrown every groom who's dared approach him. A magnificent creature, but utterly untamable." "Perhaps," drawled Baron von Richter with a sly glance at Liesel. "The little maid could do better. She seems to have quite the way with ... rough tasks." Fresh laughter erupted from the gathered nobles. Prince Alaric's eyes sparkled with cruel mischief as he turned to Liesel. "Indeed. What say you, girl? Care to try your hand at something beyond scrubbing floors?" Liesel's heart thundered in her chest. She thought of her father, how he'd taught her that horses responded to kindness more than force. His prayers and gentle ways had tamed many a wild beast. "Your Highness, I ... She began softly. "Come now," Alaric commanded, clearly enjoying himself. "Show us your expertise, unless you're afraid." The courtiers gathered closer, eager for entertainment. Liesel slowly rose to her feet, wiping her hands on her apron. In the nearby stable, she could hear Fenrir's powerful kicks against his stall door. "Very well, your highness," she said quietly, drawing on every lesson her father had taught her. As she approached the stable, the watching nobles fell silent. Fenrir's massive black form towered in his stall, his eyes rolling white with distrust. Liesel's lips moved in silent prayer, her father's words asking for guidance and blessing. "Be gentle, be patient, be kind," she whispered to herself, extending her hand slowly toward the great stallion. "Trust must be earned, never forced." Fenrir's nostrils flared, testing her scent. His powerful neck arched as he assessed this new human before him. The courtyard held its collective breath. With infinite patience, Liesel kept her hand extended, palm up, speaking soft words of comfort. Minutes stretched like hours until, to the astonishment of all, Fenrir's proud head lowered. His velvet nose touched her palm in acceptance. Gasps erupted from the watching crowd. Prince Alaric's face darkened with something between anger and amazement. That evening, the servants' hall hummed with excited whispers. Did you see? Like magic, it was the prince's own horse. But Liesel sat apart from the gossip and excitement, studying her blistered palms in the dim candlelight. The same rough hands that had earned the prince's mockery had also accomplished what no nobleman could. She understood, with growing certainty, that this day had altered her fate forever. For better or worse, she had caught the attention of the royal court. The morning sun streamed through gaps in the stable walls as Liesel attacked her work with fierce determination. She had risen before dawn, hoping to lose herself in the familiar rhythm of mucking stalls and laying fresh straw. Her hands still tingled from yesterday's encounter with Fenrir, the prince's infamous black stallion. The stable door crashed open, making her jump. Prince Alaric strode in, his polished boots clicking against the wooden floor. Oh, he carried himself with his usual aristocratic bearing. Something seemed different about him today. His eyes darted about, refusing to meet hers directly. "You there, girl?" he called out, his voice carrying a forced authority that didn't quite mask his uncertainty. Yesterday's display with Fenrir was ... unexpected. Liesel curtsied deeply, keeping her eyes lowered. "Your Highness, I have decided," he continued, adjusting his leather gloves with careful precision, "that you shall be Fenrir's permanent handler from this day forward." Liesel's head snapped up in surprise. "But Your Highness, I have my regular duties." "The castle steward has already been informed." Prince Alaric cut in, his jaw tightened. "This is a royal command, not a request." As if summoned by his words, the castle steward appeared in the doorway, his lined face stern. "Miss Bauer, you will do as His Highness commands. Your other duties will be reassigned." Liesel's throat tightened. The extra attention from nobility never led to anything good for common folk like her. "Yes, sir," she managed. "Excellent," Prince Alaric declared. "We ride in 1 hour. I wish to see if yesterday's success was mere chance." The hour passed too quickly. Soon Liesel found herself atop Fenrir, riding beside the prince through the castle grounds. The great stallion moved beneath her with surprising gentleness, responding to her lightest touch. "You sit a horse well enough for a servant," Prince Alaric observed, though his tone suggested this surprised him. "Where did you learn?" "My father taught me, Your Highness. He trained horses before he passed." "Ah, yes, the common touch." The prince's lip curled slightly. "Though I suppose even crude methods can occasionally prove effective." Liesel's cheeks burned. "There was nothing crude about my father's ways, Your Highness. He believed kindness accomplished more than force." The prince turned sharply in his saddle, clearly unused to being challenged. But Liesel met his gaze steadily, her chin lifted. For a long moment, they regarded each other in tense silence. Finally, Prince Alaric's expression shifted, showing a flicker of something like respect. "You speak your mind boldly for one of your station. Truth knows no station, Your Highness." A strange look crossed his face, but he said nothing more as they continued their ride. That evening, the servants' hall hummed with whispered conversations. Liesel tried to ignore them as she ate her simple supper, but fragments reached her ears. Nonetheless, "Third time today he's been to the stables. ... Never seen His Highness so interested in a horse's care before ... Or perhaps it's not the horse he's interested in." Liesel pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. As twilight approached, she made her way back to the stables for one final check on Fenrir. The great black horse greeted her with a soft nicker as she lifted a brush to his gleaming coat. "There now," she murmured, working out a tangle in his mane. "You're not nearly the demon they claim, are you? Just needed someone to listen." In the deepening shadows beyond the stable door, Prince Alaric stood motionless, watching. He had come, intending to ensure his prize stallion was properly tended, but found himself transfixed by the quiet scene before him. The fierce horse that had thrown every groom now stood peaceful as a lamb, while the humble maid spoke to him as gently as any mother with a child. Something stirred in the prince's chest, an unfamiliar warmth he couldn't name. He watched as Liesel pressed her cheek against Fenrir's neck, her eyes closed in contentment, and felt the strange sensation grow stronger before she could notice his presence. Prince Alaric turned and slipped away into the gathering dark, his thoughts in unexpected turmoil. The chapel bells rang clear across the castle grounds as servants and nobles filed into their separate sections for Sunday's service. Liesel smoothed her freshly pressed skirts and slipped into the back row of the servants' pews, clutching her prayer book close. The morning light filtered through stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the stone floor. From her position, she could see the royal family's private alcove where Prince Alaric sat, resplendent in deep blue velvet. Though he faced forward, his usual confident posture seemed somehow rigid today. Whispers and sidelong glances from the noble lady's maid, Liesel sink lower in her seat, their disapproving murmurs carrying even to the servants' section. "Father." Anselm's familiar voice filled the chapel as he began the service, but Liesel found her thoughts wandering. Each time she bowed her head in prayer, she felt the weight of judging eyes upon her. The past week's daily sessions with Fenrir had set tongues wagging throughout the castle. After the final hymn faded, Liesel remained in her seat, letting others file out first. As she finally rose to leave, two richly dressed courtiers lingered near the holy water font, their heads bent close in gossip. "The arrangements are nearly complete," the First Lady whispered, her silk fan fluttering. "The Duchess Alina von Reichenstadt arrives within the fortnight, and not a moment too soon," replied her companion. "His Highness needs a proper noble bride to settle him down. These distractions, with common folk must end." Liesel's heart seemed to stop in her chest. She gripped the wooden pew until her knuckles turned white, the words striking her like physical blows. Of course, there would be a betrothal. What else had she expected? She hurried from the chapel, barely seeing where she went as tears threatened to spill. How foolish she had been, allowing herself to treasure those quiet moments in the stables. Those rare glimpses of the real man behind the prince's mask. Such dreams could only bring pain, and worse, could damage both their reputations. The day passed in a blur of duties, but as evening fell, Liesel found herself back in the stables for Fenrir's final check. The great black horse nickered softly at her approach, and she managed a weak smile as she offered him an apple. "I thought I might find you here." She whirled to find Prince Alaric standing in the doorway, a single lantern casting his face in shadows. He wore riding clothes instead of his usual finery, as if he'd been seeking an escape. "Your Highness," she curtsied quickly. "I was just finishing Fenrir's evening care." "No need for such formality. Not here." He moved closer, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Here, at least, I can speak freely." Liesel's hands trembled as she continued brushing Fenrir's coat. Perhaps your Highness should not speak freely with me at all, because of the betrothal." His bitter laugh held no humor. "News travels fast, I see." "It is as it should be," Liesel said softly, though each word felt like glass in her throat. "You are a prince. Such matches are your duty." He spat the word like poison, a lifetime bound to a stranger for political advantage. Tell me, Liesel, you who understand horses so well, is it not cruel to harness a wild spirit without love? Sometimes, she whispered, we must accept the paths God sets before us, however difficult they seem. Alaric moved closer. Close. Enough that she could see the pain in his eyes. And if that path feels wrong, if every instinct rebels against it, then we pray for wisdom and strength to do what is right. Later that night, in her tiny chamber beneath the eaves, Liesel knelt. Beside her narrow bed, the single candle cast wavering shadows as she drew out her father's old rosary, the wooden beads smooth from years of faithful prayers. Tears fell freely now as she clutched it close, asking for guidance she desperately needed. Please, she whispered into the darkness, show me how to guard my heart. Show me how to remember my place. But even as she prayed, she knew it might already be too late for such wisdom. Dawn mist curled around Liesel's ankles as she led Fenrir from his stall into the practice yard. The massive black stallion followed with surprising gentleness, his hooves clicking softly against the cobblestones. The morning air held that special stillness that came before the castle truly woke, when even the kitchen fires were just being lit. Good morning, came a familiar voice, making Liesel start. Prince Alaric emerged from the fog like a figure from a dream, his riding clothes far simpler than his usual court finery. Without his customary entourage, he seemed almost human. Your Highness? Liesel dipped into a curtsy, keeping a steady hand on Fenrir's lead. I wasn't expecting you at this hour. I thought, ... double quotes, he cleared his throat. That is, I wish to learn how you do it, how you gentle him so. The request surprised her. Very well, Your Highness. First, you must approach without fear or force. She demonstrated, letting Fenrir sniff her palm before stroking his velvet nose. He senses what's in your heart. Alaric stepped forward, his usual confidence wavering. When he reached for the reins, his grip was tight, making Fenrir toss his head. Gently, Liesel murmured. Without thinking, she placed her hand over his, loosening his hold. Like this, let him choose to trust you. The touch sent warmth spreading up her arm. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither moved. Then Alaric drew a shaky breath, and Liesel snatched her hand back, remembering her place. You make it look so simple, he said, voice rough, speaking truth to beast and man alike. I know no other way, Your Highness. That's what I envy about you. The words tumbled out as if he couldn't stop them. You're free to speak your mind, to be exactly who you are, while I... He gestured at his fine clothes. We nobles wrap ourselves in pretty lies and empty courtesies. Sometimes I forget who I truly am beneath it all. Liesel's heart ached at the loneliness in his voice. Perhaps that's why Fenrir responds to me. Animals care nothing for titles or masks. They work together as the sun rose higher, Alaric learning to gentle his commands, to request rather than demand. By the time the morning bell rang, Fenrir was eating an apple from the prince's palm. Throughout the day, Liesel caught snippets of conversation among the servants. In the laundry, two maids whispered about how the prince hadn't thrown a single tantrum all week. In the kitchen, Cook remarked that His Highness had actually thanked her for breakfast, something unheard of before. It's that horse girl's influence, said a footman, nodding wisely. She's smoothing his rough edges, mark my words. Liesel kept her head down and continued her work, trying to ignore how such talk made her pulse quicken. The day's warmth faded into evening chill as Liesel climbed the narrow stairs to her family's quarters above the stables. The familiar scent of her mother's herb tea greeted her, but tonight it couldn't mask a more worrying smell, the metallic temps of blood. Matthias, she called, hurrying inside. Her brother sat hunched in his chair by the window, their mother hovering anxiously. Beside him, a blood-stained rag was clutched in his trembling hands. His face, already too pale, had taken on a gray cast that made Liesel's stomach clench with fear. "It's nothing," he tried to say, but another cough racked his thin frame. Fresh red spots bloomed on the cloth. "We can't ignore this anymore," their mother whispered, her work-worn hands twisting her apron. "He needs a physician." Liesel crossed to them, taking Matthias's free hand. His fingers felt like ice. "We'll find a way," she promised, though her mind raced with calculations. A doctor's fees would cost more than they earned in months. Perhaps. I could ask for an advance on my wages. No. Matthias squeezed her hand weakly. "You do too much already, sister." Their mother pressed a cool cloth to his forehead, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Liesel stood frozen, watching her brother's labored breathing, feeling the weight of responsibility settle ever heavier on her shoulders. The dawn light had barely touched the castle walls when Liesel stood before Dr. Heinrich's chambers. Her hands clasped tightly together. The physician's stern face showed no softening as she pleaded her case. 3 silver coins per visit, plus the cost of medicines, he stated flatly, adjusting his wire-rimmed spectacles. "That is my final offer, girl. Your brother's consumption requires proper treatment." Liesel's heart sank. 3 silver coins might as well have been 300. "Please, sir, perhaps I could work off the debt. I could clean your surgery, tend to, I have enough servants." He turned away, arranging his glass bottles of medicines. "I cannot run a practice on promises and good intentions." Fighting back. Tears, Liesel hurried to begin her morning duties. She would find a way. She had to. In the following days, she took on every extra task she could find. She scrubbed floors before dawn, helped in the laundry during her midday rest, and assisted the cook's helpers well into the evening. Her hands grew raw from hot water and harsh soap, but every extra copper penny went into a small cloth purse, hidden beneath her thin mattress. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. One morning, as she led Fenrir through his exercises, her vision swam with exhaustion. The reins slipped from her grasp, and she stumbled. Strong hands caught her shoulders. "Careful there," Prince Alaric said, his voice unusually gentle. When she tried to step away, his grip tightened. "Something's wrong. You're pale as a ghost." "'Tis nothing, Your Highness. Just a moment of weakness. Don't lie to me." His tone held command now. "You've been working yourself to death these past days? I demand to know why." Liesel's throat tightened. She couldn't tell him, shouldn't tell him. But exhaustion had worn away her defenses, and the words spilled out. "My brother, Matthias, his consumption grows worse. The physician demands 3 silver coins per visit, and the medicines, ... Her voice broke. Alaric's expression changed, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "This brother, he means everything to you, is all the family I have, besides our mother." Liesel wiped her eyes with her sleeve, mortified to be crying before the prince. "Forgive me, Your Highness. These are not your concerns." "No," he said softly. "Perhaps they should be." The next morning, Dr. Heinrich appeared at their modest cottage door, medical bag in hand. "I'm here to tend to the boy," he announced. As if this were a regular occurrence, Liesel's mother gaped. "But sir, we haven't the means. It's been arranged." The physician swept past them to Matthias's bedside. "I'll be visiting twice weekly. The medicines will be delivered fresh from my surgery." That evening, Liesel found Prince Alaric in the stables, brushing Fenrir himself to task no royal should. Lower himself to perform. "Your Highness," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I know it was you." He didn't turn around. "I don't know what you mean. The physician? The medicines?" Tears slid down her cheeks. "I can never repay such." kindness. Now he did face her, his expression fierce. You've shown more nobility in your care for your family than most who wear crowns. Consider it repayment for teaching me about true strength. Their eyes met, and something dangerous and wonderful passed. Between them, Liesel felt her heart flutter like a trapped bird. This gratitude, this warmth spreading through her chest, was more than simple thankfulness. Much more later that night, in their tiny cottage chamber lit by a single candle, Liesel sat on her mother's bed. "We must keep this secret," she whispered, though there was no one to hear. Such charity from nobles. It often comes with expectations. We cannot afford to meet. Her mother's work-worn hand covered hers. "You're right, my dear. The prince's kindness is a blessing, but it could also be our undoing. We must guard our hearts as carefully as our tongues." Liesel nodded, thinking of Alaric's eyes in the stable, of the way her heart had leaped at his nearness. Yes, they must. Be very careful indeed. The grand ballroom blazed with 1,000 candles, their light dancing off gilt mirrors and crystal chandeliers. Liesel's fingers trembled slightly as she balanced the silver tray of wine goblets, grateful for the simple, half-mask that shielded her face, like all the servants working tonight's masquerade. She wore the plain black domino that marked her station, a stark contrast to the elaborate costumes of the nobility. Peacock feathers bobbed in jewels, sparkled as masked dancers whirled past. The air was thick with perfume, and the sweet notes of the orchestra through gaps in the crowd. Liesel caught glimpses of magnificent costumes, ladies dressed as mythological goddesses, gentlemen as dashing heroes of legend. "Your wine, my lords," she murmured, offering her tray to a cluster of masked nobles. As she moved through the press of bodies, she searched, despite herself, for one particular figure. Thereby, the marble columns. Prince Alaric cut a striking figure in midnight blue velvet, his mask adorned with silver stars, even in disguise. She would know him anywhere. A new dance began, and the crowd shifted. Liesel found herself in a quieter corner, adjusting her grip on the now empty tray. Suddenly, a tall figure in blue appeared beside her. "Might I have this dance?" The voice behind the star-studded mask was familiar, though pitched low. Liesel's heart stuttered. "Your high, my lord, I cannot. I am merely tonight. We are all in disguise." He interrupted softly. "No one need to know who dances with whom." His gloved hand extended toward her. She knew she should refuse. Every lesson in propriety screamed against it. But the music swelled so sweetly, and his eyes behind the mask held such gentle pleading. Setting down her tray, she placed her trembling hand in his. He drew her into a shadowed alcove where thick, velvet curtains partially screened them from view. The dance was a simple waltz, yet Liesel felt as though she floated on air. Alaric's hand at her waist was warm and steady, guiding her through the steps as if they had danced together 100 times before. "You move with more grace than half the noble ladies here," he murmured. "The stable yard teaches its own kind of dancing," she replied, allowing herself a small smile. "One must be light on one's feet around spirited horses." His quiet laugh warmed her heart. For these precious moments, rank and duty fell away. They were simply a man and woman moving together in the candlelight. The clock began to strike midnight. Alaric's steps slowed. His head bent toward hers, and Liesel's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the warmth of his breath. See? The flutter of his eyelashes behind his mask. But as the final chime faded, a sudden movement jostled them. Liesel stumbled, and her mask slipped askew. Several nearby dancers turned to stare. In the harsh light of revelation, her servant's dress and work-reddened hands betrayed her completely. A hush fell over their corner of the ballroom. Then came the whispers, sharp as needles. "The stable girl. How dare she such presumption? Your Highness." A liveried footman hurried forward, bowing low. The Queen Mother demands your immediate presence. The Duchess of Reichenstadt has arrived early, and Her Majesty wishes to finalize the betrothal contract tonight. Alaric stood frozen, his own mask now more burden than disguise. Lisa lied, but she was already backing away, shame burning in her chest. How could she have been so foolish? This magical moment had been nothing but a dream, as substantial as moonlight on water. More whispers followed her retreat. Do you see? That common maid dancing with the prince. What scandal! Liesel fled through the crowd, past sneering masks and pointing fingers. She burst through the ballroom doors into the garden, where frost silvered the stone pathways. The winter air stabbed her lungs as she ran, tears freezing on her cheeks. Finally, hidden behind a marble statue, she stopped. Her hands shook as she clutched her rough servant's apron to her face, trying to muffle her sobs. The music from the ballroom drifted out mockingly, the same waltz they had danced to, now transformed into a reminder of everything she could never have. 2 weeks had passed since the masquerade, and a heavy gloom settled over the palace like a burial shroud. The morning chapel service echoed with whispers as the priest announced the banns for Prince Alaric's betrothal to the Duchess of Württemberg. Liesel kept her eyes fixed on her worn prayer book, her fingers tracing the familiar leather binding, as nobles turned to stare at her in the servants' pews. In the days that followed, she avoided the stables, throwing herself into other duties, scrubbing floors, laundering linens, anything to stay away from where her heart ached most. But Fenrir's distant whinnies carried across the courtyard, growing more frantic and wild with each passing day. On the 4th morning, the stable master himself came to find her. The black stallion refuses his feed, he reported grimly. He's kicked 2 grooms and broken through his stall twice. Before Liesel could respond, Prince Alaric stormed into the servants' hall, his riding boots muddy and his face thunderous. "Return to your duties with Fenrir," he commanded, his voice carrying across the shocked silence. "At once, Your Highness." Liesel protested softly. "The Queen Mother forbade." "I don't care what my mother said," Alaric snapped, though his eyes held a desperate plea. "The horse needs you." Word of the prince's defiance spread through the castle like wildfire. By midday, Queen Isolde swept into the stable yard, a cluster of anxious courtiers trailing in her wake. Liesel had just finished calming Fenrir, her hand resting on his velvet nose, when the queen's shadow fell across them both. "So," Queen Isolde's voice cut like winter frost, "here is the witch who has bewitched both beast and prince." Liesel turned, dropping into a deep curtsy. "Your Majesty, I assure you, silence." The queen's silk skirts rustled as she circled. Liesel like a hawk studying its prey. How else could a common maid tame a horse that master trainers could not touch? How else could she turn a prince's head from his proper duties? The gathered courtiers murmured in agreement. Liesel felt their hostile stares burning into her back as she kept her eyes lowered, her heart pounding. "It was only patience, Your Majesty," she whispered. "As my father taught me your father." The queen's laugh was cruel. "A peasant horse trainer who died in debt." "No, girl. There is darker craft at work here." She turned to the castle steward. "Remove her from service immediately." "Your Majesty, please," Liesel pleaded, thinking of her sick brother, of their desperate need for her wages. "My family will leave the cottage by nightfall," the queen commanded, "or the soldiers will remove them." As if summoned by her words, 2 guards appeared, their hands resting meaningfully on their sword hilts. The steward stepped forward, holding out his hand for Liesel's ring of stable keys. With trembling fingers, she unknotted them from her apron strings. Fenrir nickered softly as she pressed a final kiss to his nose. "Be good, my friend," she whispered. The walk to collect her. Few possessions was a gauntlet of whispers and stares. In the servants' hall, even those who had been friendly now turned away, crossing themselves. Liesel changed out of her livery into her own simple dress, tucking her father's worn prayer book into her pocket. Outside, fat drops of rain began to fall as she trudged down the muddy road toward her family's cottage. The chapel bells tolled the hour, each bronze note striking her heart like a hammer. Tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks as she walked away from everything she had come to love: Fenrir's gentle trust, the warmth of the stable, and most painful of all, the memory of a prince's almost kiss in a candlelit ballroom. Behind her, the castle's windows blazed with light against the gathering storm. But for Liesel, they now held only darkness and disgrace. Her worn shoes squelched in the mud as she walked, each step taking her further from the brief dream of belonging she had dared to cherish. The small cottage hearth cast flickering shadows on the walls as Liesel wrung out a damp cloth. Her brother Matthias lay on his thin straw mattress, his breathing labored and shallow. Their mother knelt beside him, rosary beads clicking as she whispered desperate prayers. "Lord in heaven, have mercy on my children," her mother murmured, voice trembling. "Grant us your protection in our hour of need." Liesel pressed the cool cloth to Matthias's fevered brow. Without the physician's medicines, those precious vials they could no longer afford, his cough had worsened. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his chest rattled with each breath. "Tell me again about father's horses," Matthias whispered between coughs. "The way they would dance for him at dawn." Liesel swallowed past the lump in her throat. "I loved him so." Even the wildest stallions grew gentle under his touch. She smoothed his sweat-dampened hair. "Rest now, dear brother. Save your strength." Days blurred together in a haze of grinding poverty. Liesel rose before dawn to work in her neighbor's fields, her shoulders aching as she helped bring in the harvest. Some paid her with copper pennies, others with scraps of bread or withered vegetables. Each evening, she returned home bone-weary, her hands raw and bleeding. "You must rest, child," her mother urged one night, seeing Liesel's exhaustion. "I cannot." Liesel needed her aching muscles. "The bailiff threatens to seize our cottage if we cannot pay the new tax. We need every coin." Word reached their village of the grand preparations at the palace. Market women whispered of silk banners being hung, of foreign delicacies arriving by wagon. The prince's betrothal celebrations would span 3 days, they said, with feasting and dancing late into the night. Yet other rumors spread as well. The stable boys spoke of Fenrir's increasing wildness, how the great black stallion had thrown 3 grooms in a week, breaking free of his stall to rampage through the palace grounds. Even Prince Alaric could no longer control him. The horses, screams of fury echoed through the night, they said. Like a creature possessed, Liesel tried not to think of Fenrir, of those quiet mornings when he would nuzzle her palm for apple slices. She could not afford such memories now. Her world had shrunk to the space between cottage and field, between her brother's sickbed and their dwindling food stores. "Perhaps we could appeal to the prince," her mother suggested one evening, hope touching her tired voice. "Surely he would remember your service." "No." Liesel's tone was sharp. "We must not draw his attention again." The queen made her wishes clear. She softened, seeing her mother's hurt expression. "We will survive on our own strength, as we always have." The autumn air grew crisp as leaves turned golden. Liesel worked harder, taking on washing and mending for the village women. Her fingers grew cramped from endless stitching by candlelight, but each coin brought them closer to paying their debt. Then one morning, hoofbeats thundered down the village road. A royal messenger in bright livery reined his horse before the town square, unfurling a gilt-edged scroll. "Hear thee, hear thee," he called as villagers gathered. In 3 days' time, their Royal Majesties command all citizens to attend the wedding procession of His Highness Prince Alaric von Falkenhayn to Her Grace, the Duchess of Württemberg. The royal couple shall process through the capital square. At noon, all subjects are bid to witness this joyous union. Liesel stood frozen in the shadow of a merchant's stall, her basket of mending forgotten at her feet. The messenger's words seemed to echo across the square, each syllable striking like a physical blow. 3 days. In 3 days, everything she had tried so hard to forget would parade before her eyes. A woman jostled past her, exclaiming excitedly about the spectacle to come. Liesel barely heard her. She gathered her fallen work with trembling hands and hurried home, where at least the familiar sight of her brother's smile and her mother's prayers could anchor her against the storm of emotions threatening to break. The capital's grand square teemed with life on the morning of Prince Alaric's wedding procession. Market vendors called their wares, children darted between legs, and excited chatter filled the air. Flags bearing the royal crest fluttered from every window, their blue and gold colors bright against the weathered stone buildings. Liesel and her mother pressed through the crowd, their worn cloaks marking them as village folk among the sea of festive townspeople. Her mother's fingers clutched her arm tightly. "We should not be here," her mother whispered, eyes darting nervously. "If the Queen's guards recognize you, ... Please, Mother," Liesel breathed. "Just once more. Then I shall put all thoughts of him away forever." They found a spot near a baker's stall, the scent of fresh bread mixing with the tang of horses and unwashed bodies. Liesel's heart hammered against her ribs as trumpet blasts echoed off the ancient cathedral walls. "Make way for His Highness, Prince Alaric von Falkenhayn." A herald's voice boomed. The crowd surged forward. Liesel steadied herself against the rough stone wall, straining to see. Then her breath caught in her throat. Atop Fenrir's massive black form, Alaric rode at the head of the procession. His ceremonial uniform gleamed with gold braid, his bearing every inch the royal air. But even from a distance, Liesel could see the tightness in his jaw, the rigid set of his shoulders. Fenrir pranced nervously, tossing his proud head. The noise and press of bodies clearly unsettled him. As the procession neared the square's center, a group of children burst from the crowd, waving ribbons and shouting. The sudden movement spooked the already agitated stallion. Fenrir reared with a terrible scream. Alaric fought for control as the massive horse plunged sideways, sending nearby nobles scattering. Women shrieked. Guards shouted orders. Pure chaos erupted as the great beast threatened to bolt. Without thinking, Liesel pushed past her mother's grasping hands. "Liesel, no." She heard her cry, but her feet were already moving. She ducked under a guard's reaching arm and burst into the cleared space around the panicking horse. "Stand back, girl," a soldier bellowed. But Liesel's voice cut through Fenrir's terror, clear and steady as morning bells. "Easy, my proud one," she called in the gentle tone that had first won the stallion's trust. "Easy now." Fenrir's ears pricked forward. His wild eyes found her, nostrils flaring. Liesel approached slowly, palm extended, murmuring the calming words her father had taught her. The great horse trembled but held still. A collective gasp rose from the crowd as her fingers touched his velvet nose. Within moments, Fenrir's breathing steadied. He lowered his massive head to nuzzle her shoulder, as docile as a plow horse. The square fell silent. Liesel became painfully aware of hundreds of eyes upon her. She dared to look up at Alaric. The prince sat frozen in his saddle, staring down at her with an expression of wonder and dawning resolution. In one fluid movement, he swung to the ground. His boots struck the cobblestones with ringing finality. "My lords and ladies," Alaric's voice carried to every corner of the hushed square. "Fellow subjects of Bavaria, I stand before you to speak." truth from my heart." Queen Isolde emerged from her curtained carriage, face white with fury. "Alaric, you will cease this foolishness at once." But the prince continued, his eyes never leaving Liesel's face. "I cannot proceed with this marriage. Of state? My heart belongs not to the Duchess, but to this woman before you. Liesel Bauer. In her, I have found more nobility of spirit than in all the royal courts of Europe." Shocked whispers rippled through the crowd. Noble ladies swooned. The Duchess's retinue burst into outraged exclamations. "This is scandal," cried an elderly duke. "The crown prince cannot marry a commoner." But from the back of the crowd a cheer went up. It was taken up by others, craftsmen, merchants, servants, until the square rang with approval. Liesel stood, trembling as Alaric strode forward and clasped her work-roughened hand in his. Queen Isolde's face had turned to stone. Her lips pressed into a bloodless line as she watched her son's public defiance. Yet Alaric's grip remained firm and sure around Liesel's fingers, his thumb gently stroking her palm, as if to say, "At last, my love, at last." Candlelight flickered against the dark oak panels of the royal council chamber. The Queen Mother sat, rigid on her gilded chair, her face a mask of ice as she surveyed the assembled nobles, priests, and royal advisers. Prince Alaric stood tall beside Liesel, his hand finding hers in quiet defiance. "Your Majesty," Alaric's voice rang clear through the hushed chamber, "I stand before you not just as your son, but as a man who has learned true nobility dwells in the heart." He squeezed Liesel's hand. "This woman, born humble though she may be, has shown more dignity, courage, and grace than many who wear silk and jewels." Liesel's heart thundered in her chest, but she held her head high, drawing strength from the warmth of Alaric's touch. The Queen's lips thinned to a dangerous line. "You speak of dignity while threatening scandal," Queen Isolde said, her words sharp as icicles. "The crown cannot bow to common blood." "Cannot," Alaric challenged, "or will not. What divine law declares that virtue must be inherited with titles?" From the shadows, Father Benedict, the elderly royal confessor, stepped forward. His weathered face bore the wisdom of decades. "If I may speak, Your Majesty." At the Queen's curt nod, he continued, "We have witnessed something extraordinary. This maiden's gift with the royal stallion, a beast no other could tame, speaks of heaven's touch. Such grace comes not from earthly station, but divine favor." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Other priests nodded in agreement, their expressions thoughtful. The Queen's fingers tightened on her chair's armrest. "The common folk already whisper of miracles," another advisor added carefully. "They saw her calm Fenrir in the square. They believe it a sign." "The people's mood grows dangerous," the captain of the guard warned. "There is talk of riots if the girl faces punishment. They say God has chosen her." Queen Isolde's face remained stone, but calculation flickered in her eyes. Before she could speak, a rustle of silk announced movement. The Duchess Elena stepped forward, her bearing elegant and composed. "Your Majesty," Elena's voice carried gentle authority. "I cannot, in good conscience, proceed with a marriage where the bridegroom's heart belongs to another." She offered a graceful curtsy. "I withdraw my suit with no ill will. Let love guide where duty once demanded." The chamber held its breath. Queen Isolde's gaze swept the room, measuring support, weighing consequences. At last, she drew herself up. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "in these changing times, the crown must bend lest it break." Her eyes fixed on Liesel. "You have shown remarkable ... qualities. Do not make me regret this concession." Joy bloomed in Liesel's chest, but she contained it, responding with a deep and respectful curtsy. "Your Majesty honors me. I swear to be worthy of your trust." Within days, the royal chaplain read the banns anew, declaring the intention of marriage between Prince Alaric von Falkenhayn and Liesel Bauer. By special license granted. Weeks later, beneath the soaring vaults of the castle chapel, Liesel walked down the flower-strewn aisle. Her gown was simple but elegant, white silk adorned with modest lace. Her mother and brother Matthias, now recovered thanks to continued care, wept openly in the front pew. Alaric waited at the altar, his eyes shining with love and pride. As Liesel reached him, he took her hands in his, their fingers intertwining, like their destinies. Before God and these witnesses, they spoke their vows, their voices steady with conviction. Love had transformed them both, the proud prince learning humility, the humble maid discovering her own nobility of spirit. Outside the chapel doors, Fenrir stood peacefully saddled, his black coat gleaming in the sunlight. The great stallion dipped his head as the newlyweds emerged, as if offering his own blessing to their union. The bells of every church tower rang out across the kingdom, their joyous peals announcing a new chapter in Bavaria's history, the dawn of a princess who had proven that true nobility could rise from any station, guided by love's transforming power. Thanks for taking a moment to feel with me. If this story reminded you of what matters, hit subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow. Continuing our story.